Hi, today we will be talking about Alfie Kohn and his views on education. If you would pull up the attached PowerPoint, and that's what we'll be talking from, and you can follow along with it. So on the title page you should see Alfie Kohn. Moving on to the first slide is his views on progressive education. That's kind of Alfie Kohn's school of thought, is progressive education. He's a leading figure in progressive education, which promotes the present experience with the use of hands-on projects, thematic units, emphasis on problem solving and critical thinking, collaborative and cooperative learning projects, and group work and development of social skills. So this kind of moves away from the general teach to the curriculum and then test over. It's kind of more project-based. It's working together. It's building a social environment in the classroom. That's kind of what progressive education and his school of thought approaches. His views on education in general. Kohn feels that a move should be made away from the traditional approach of learning, which is textbook-based. Like I just said, we kind of get in the habit, and that's the general view of education of the past, is we teach strictly from the textbook, lists, dates, facts, figures, and then test in multiple choice or rote memorization. That's what education is kind of focused on. He's moving away from this. He argues that knowledge should be taught in a context and for a purpose. Everything that students learn should have meaning to them. It's kind of the Simon Sinek view on it's not what we're learning, it's why we're learning it. So he says learning should be focused on problems, projects, and questions, not lists of facts, skills, and separate disciplines, just kind of what we just talked about. Kohn states classes should be discussion-based to give students a voice in the classroom and a meaningful impact on curriculum and discipline. So a lot of the views, like I said, are community-based. He wants discussion in the classroom, making it a social environment, moving even further past just the facts, figures, but discussing this amongst your peers, learning social skills in the classroom. So pause your video, and there's a hyperlink in the PowerPoint that I'd like you to watch. It's achievement versus learning. It kind of discusses how high standards isn't learning, and there's been such a push for high standards in the classroom, but he talks more about how that detaches students from learning, and achievement is kind of what schools focus on, and you see how that is not a goal in the classroom. So pause your video now. It's just a 1.5 minute video. Go ahead and watch that. Okay, moving on to the next slide, classroom management. Kohn has stated that he finds that much of the discipline today is focused on focused on compliance. Teachers want students to comply and conform to what they see as an ideal student, and that's not what we should do. We cannot blame students for acting aggressively or selfishly. Students have shown these characteristics are more natural than impulses towards empathy or generosity. So selfishness and aggressiveness are human characteristics that we can't punish students for, is kind of his view. We just need to help them choose to use the empathy and the generosity as opposed to these aggressive and selfish behaviors. He says more focus should be placed on students becoming caring, responsible problem solvers. And this can be done by emphasizing activities that enhance understanding of how others see the world, replacing isolation and competition with a feeling of community in the classroom. So as I kind of talked about earlier, creating a social environment in the classroom is what he wants. And this can be done through discussion, learning to support your own viewpoints, but learning to respect those of others. So again, there's a video attached. It's Alfie Kohn on punishment. Watch this, and he kind of talks about how isolationism is bad, and that's a lot of what punishment is. And he uses an example of a little girl that kicks her sister and then gets sent to her room, and just kind of listen to what we think is happening in there as opposed to what generally is happening, and put yourself in that situation back when you were younger and you got sent to your room, the things and thoughts that were going through your head. I reflected a lot on that myself, and can totally see where he's coming from. And as he says, it's laughable to think that punishment, the way we use it, works. So again, pause your video and go ahead and watch Alfie Kohn on punishment. Okay, on to the next slide is Kohn's views on grades. He says grades have a negative impact on students' education. Those who don't get good grades see it as unattainable to reach that high level, and those who do become uninterested in it as it is their only reward. Research shows that the more you reward, the less you are interested. A quote from him is, grades don't prepare children for the real world unless one has in mind a world where interest in learning and quality of thinking are unimportant. So what he's kind of saying is our focus is the grade, not the critical approaches of problem solving and stuff. He thinks more should be on problem solving and reaching a solution, and we should reward students for that as opposed to answering A, B, C, D, and then rewarding an A for knowing all of that. He does state that grades are here to stay, but he sees more beneficial approach as being the implementation of a narrative assessment and quantitative summaries or conferences opposed to number and letter grades. So by putting a number, a percentage correct, or an A, a B, a distinguished, a proficient, like that doesn't tell students anything. That doesn't tell them where they got, what they missed, how they did, what they can do to get better. He thinks more of a narrative response, and you kind of see schools move into that in some areas, but he thinks this will be more beneficial and more of a real world approach. Like in the real world, you're out there, you do a job, your boss tells you you did a good job and why, or you could improve in this, and he says that would be much more beneficial. So again, there's a video here. It's bad news if students get motivated to get A's. So he kind of, as was discussed, the more you reward, the less interested students become in grades. So it becomes more about getting that A as opposed to learning what they learned. So watch this video, pause this video and watch the one in the PowerPoint. So. Okay, moving on to the next slide, Kohn's view on homework. Kohn's approach of homework is we implement it to promote good work habits and reinforce what they've been taught. Studies have shown that none of these are true, and the only reason homework is given is because it is decided ahead of time that students will be doing something every night. Oftentimes it is decided much later what will be done. Kohn finds oftentimes homework just undermines children's interest in learning and should be reserved when teachers find that project would be better served done at home. So what he's kind of saying here is a lot of times teachers approach homework as something they're going to give every night. Like students need to be doing more learning than they're just at school. And then later on they decide what will be done at home. So he says this is a very bad thing. Like homework should only be given when it's more beneficial to do at home. Like when, say, there's a narrative project that students can interview their parents. Obviously they can't do that at school, so that would be a more beneficial assignment to do at home. By doing 30 problems out of their math book, he says that doesn't really help. You can do that at school. So, and a lot of times it just undermines the interest. Like they're doing their 30 problems in class, and then they have to go home and do 30 more problems. It's becomes kind of overload and overbearing on them. A lot of students don't do it. They wait and copy the next day, and they just lose focus and interest in the subject altogether. So there's 2 videos on this slide. Watch both of them. One talks about, is entitled "Are Kids Like Vending Machines?" and it just talks about how we expect them to produce at school and at home. And the other is "Making Students Work a Second Shift," and it's kind of his view on seeing that as a second shift, doing work at home as a second shift. We go to work, or say factory workers go to work, and they are not expected to go home and do any more in regards to their work. They're supposed to relax, get refreshed, get ready to give 110% the next day. And that's kind of the way he sees that students should be as well. So the conclusion, I'm sorry, I didn't give time to pause. So pause, watch those 2 videos, and then come back and we'll talk about the conclusion. The conclusion for Alfie Kohn is that learning should be contextual and learn in the environment it can be useful, which is a move of a lot of special education classes. They're teaching students in the environment the skills that they need to function in the real world, and he says this should be general education. Like, students should learn their math problems, how it applies to their life, and things like that. Learning should be collaborative and teach social skills, which I think is a great idea. I think a lot of times by doing the rote memorization and the facts and figures and all of that, students become detached from social skills and more withdrawn from each other. And even with the grades that he talked about, it becomes more of a competition that we'll talk about in a second. That takes away from working together, and you kind of see that in the society we live in today. And we should approach education as building teamwork skills. He says teachers should replace isolationism and competition with a sense of togetherness and cooperation, which is what I just discussed there. Learning should be kept to the school workday to promote interest as opposed to burnout. As we talked about, you don't expect factory workers to go home and work on putting things together at home and then bringing them back and putting things together at work as well. At home should be refreshing and relaxing and getting ready to learn the next day. Grade reports should be in the form of qualitative narrative responses to give the student a better overview of their progress. This should be so they can see where their progress is, see where they've improved, see where they've slacked, see where they can get better. So that's kind of the conclusion and the overview of Alfie Kohn's Progressive School of Education. If you on the next slide, you can see bibliographies. He has a great website, alfiekohn.org. There's a lot of articles. He's published quite a bit. A lot of video links that you can watch that are much longer than the ones that were put into this PowerPoint. So take a look at that. Learn a little more about Alfie Kohn. I think he's got some great ideas that can be applied to any classroom. So hope you enjoyed.